We've been fending off pirate attacks for 2 days now. Even as I write, the cannons are booming and the sails are blazing from Redbeard's red-hot cannonballs. Pirates are the scourge of the high seas. They're after the treasures hidden in our hold, but we blow ourselves up before we surrender to Redbeard.
Of all the pirates who sailed the seas during the golden age of piracy, from dark-eyed Kate Putnam to Captain Archibald, one name stands out as the most notorious and influential buccaneer in history, Captain Redbeard. His career was longer than any other pirate. He captured hundreds of ships and won, lost, hunted, and hid vast fortunes over his lifetime. His list of friends was short and his list of enemies long, though they intertwined so much that it was often hard to tell whose side he was on. In this 8-part Brick Lore documentary series, we'll piece together lore from the LEGO sets, comics, audio dramas, and video games to tell the story of one of the most beloved figures in LEGO history, Captain Redbeard. Redbeard's ancestors came from Spain long ago to the Tropical Sea, a region in the larger Caribbean. This group of scattered islands was ripe for piracy and treasure hunting. In earlier centuries, Incan and Aztec refugees from the Spanish conquest of the mainland had fled to the area, establishing settlements on what would be known as the Island of Fogs. These islands were also inhabited by natives with their own distinct culture, the Indigo Islanders. One of the larger European empires lay claim to the largest island, Sabatina, and other outlying islands, occupying the massive El Dorado fortress in the capital of Port Royal, not to be confused with the English settlement on nearby Jamaica. On the other side of Sabatina, the naval base in the port of Penzance became a hub of trading activity for ships from all corners of the world. The Spanish Armada maintained a presence as well, and their treasure ships often passed through the Black Reef on their way to Spain. The easy access to shipping and chains of remote islands made excellent bases for pirates such as the Blackheart Cousins, Snarlface Garcia, and Pierre Lafitte to launch raids on the islanders, colonists, and imperial trade. These pirates fortified a small city on an island that was soon known by the settlers as Forbidden Island. Generations of pirates prowled the tropical sea, including Redbeard's great-grandfather. He and other members of Redbeard's family buried fortunes in Spanish doubloons somewhere in the islands. Their locations became a family secret lost to time. With a long history of buried riches, it's little wonder that this group of scattered islands came to be called the Treasure Islands. While Redbeard is one of history's most notorious figures, much about the man has faded into legend. This includes the period in which he lived, about which there is much confusion. Artifacts with his image dating to 1489 have been found in the Netherlands, while the Stanley expedition claims to have encountered an elderly Redbeard as late as the 20th century. Dated accounts of Redbeard and his contemporaries vary wildly, ranging from the last decades of the 15th century to the first decade of the 19th. The current consensus is that while Redbeard's career was longer than most pirates, he lived sometime in the 18th century. Through some singular coincidence, Redbeard was born on exactly the same day as two of his future adversaries, Governor Broadside of the Bluecoat Settlers and King Kahuka of the Indigo Islanders. While Redbeard's famous red hair was certainly a family trait, Redbeard was probably not the surname he was born into. His first name was Roger, a name he would continue to use well into his piratical career. Roger was still a child when he discovered a treasure map that had belonged to the Spanish noble Don Cortez. Perhaps Cortez's treasure had been stolen by Redbeard's ancestors, or perhaps Cortez had turned pirate and was one of Redbeard's ancestors himself. Roger's brother Crag was with him, and the two fought over the map. They each ended up with half, sparking a feud that they continued into adulthood. One apocryphal account claims that the future Redbeard first put to sea as a deckhand under the name Roger Crow. According to this story, Roger was shipwrecked in his 20s and washed up on the shore of Achiche Island, where he was kidnapped by the islanders and rescued by a pirate named Jude Lawless. Roger then fell in with the pirates of Victoria Village, a former English settlement. After facing doomed spirits and other threats, Roger left the island, obtained his own ship, and recruited his first crew, becoming a pirate like his ancestors before him. At some point in his life, Roger had 3 children, a son and twin daughters. The twins' mother was an expert swordswoman. Her identity is still unknown. While his children all became pirates eventually, they were raised in a life of privilege outside the pirate fold. Roger lived to explore uncharted waters and went by many names in his many ports of call. He was known as Fortune in France, and Noust in Germany and the Netherlands, but soon Roger was known by his most famous alias, Redbeard. Redbeard was a gentleman pirate, a snappy dresser, and a trendsetter among the buccaneering brethren of the coast. His adoption of a distinctive beard would inspire his contemporary Edward Teach to create the persona of Blackbeard. Redbeard was known for his kindness and bravery, always ready to help his friends out of tight spots with over-the-top plots. This won him the loyalty of his crew, who soon took on the name Redbeard Pirates in his honor. Redbeard was also a natural treasure hunter. He had the uncanny ability to smell gold, especially during the full moon. The mere mention of gold was enough to send the man into a trance-like state. Even so, it seemed the young Redbeard barely knew what to do with the treasure when he got it, often burying it in the traditional pirate fashion before setting off on his next adventure. The chronology of Redbeard's early career is unclear, but his tendency to lose body parts in his adventures is a boon for historians. Redbeard lost his leg first after being attacked by a shark at the aptly named Shark Island. He replaced it with an innovative wooden peg equipped with multiple hidden compartments for gold, keys, and other small treasures. A possibly unrelated but still relevant account states that a pirate named Redbeard voyaged to the four corners of the world during this time, including Dino Island in the icy north, where he befriended the Polar Bear King. He also made supernatural enemies, including Shing, the serpent tamer of the mysterious waters, and the Duke of Bone, ruler of the Skeleton Seas. Redbeard's years of piratical success allowed him to construct a castle near Pirates Cove in Port Plunder. Redbeard had treasure buried in nearly every place he visited, and created clues to help him find it later. The Duke of Bone used his magic powers to trap Redbeard in the figurehead of his own ship while he hunted for the captain's treasure. But Redbeard's spirit guided three young members of his crew, Errol, Ollie, and Nika, to find the treasure first, breaking the spell and returning Redbeard to normal. Around this same time, Redbeard lost his left eye in battle. Redbeard took this in stride and would eventually add a patch to his Jolly Roger to match his own. Now that Redbeard was no longer attached to his ship and had gold to spare, he acquired a new vessel, a frigate much larger than his first ship. With 2 masts and 4 guns, she was light and fast enough to capture merchant vessels, but large enough to intimidate rival pirates. In later years, he outfitted her with the striped red sails that would become one of his trademarks. Under Redbeard, she would go by many names, including the Dark Shark. While Redbeard would have other ships, he would always return to this vessel, and their fates would be linked for the rest of his life. Some of the following events in Redbeard's younger years may be unrelated, but they follow such a similar pattern that they have been consolidated here to avoid repetition. Around this time, Redbeard met William Gordon Frederick Cavendish, captain of the vessel Barracuda. The exact details of Cavendish's life are still obscure and confusing. Some sources indicate that he was a notorious pirate, while others suggest that he was an innocent man. It's possible that he was originally a privateer. What we can surmise is that he had been framed by a man named Fowl for attacking one of the king's own ships and liquidating the ship's cargo, crew, and passengers without mercy. William Cavendish became known as the most feared pirate in the tropical sea. It seems that Cavendish was traveling the tropical sea in the Barracuda to find documents to prove his innocence when he fell in with Redbeard's pirates. Redbeard became very close to Cavendish and his wife. When she died of natural causes, their young son Will was placed in the care of Jeremias, a monk and cartographer living in Port Royal. Redbeard set out in search of sunken treasure, likely pursuing his family's fortune once more, but after repeatedly coming up empty-handed, Redbeard returned to piracy. He left Port Plunder behind and scouted a new island base from which he could target colonial shipping instead. It's possible this was the site near Skull Island that housed the ramshackle huts and pirate docks of Redbeard's pirate camp. His attacks were enough to turn the attention of corrupt bluecoat governors like Broadside and Hacienda away from their endless tax gathering and toward his destruction. After seizing a particularly large cargo ship laden with gold and spices, Broadside gave orders for Redbeard to be brought in and the valuable cargo reclaimed. The entire Black Ribbon fleet was dispatched to hunt down Redbeard and his associates. Its commander, Admiral Nonesuch, was dedicated to law and order above reason and mercy. He was determined to bring Redbeard in or send him to Davy Jones's locker. The Admiral's dogged determination, backed with a fleet's worth of firepower, was enough to make even the toughest pirate commander quake in his boot. The Navy eventually caught up with Redbeard and Cavendish a year after his wife's death and seized their ships. True to form, Redbeard had already hidden his plundered goods. He attempted to escape on a raft with one of his fellow pirates after his ship was taken. The shark-infested waters persuaded them to surrender. Given the timing and family resemblance to Will, it's possible that his fellow castaway was William Cavendish. The Dark Shark was put to use by the Bluecoats to attack pirate islands, and it would be some time before Redbeard would see her again. Broadside executed Cavendish, and the Barracuda ended up in the possession of Fowl, probably as a reward for betraying the captain. Redbeard was present at Cavendish's execution, and would later claim that the man's last words were to ask that Redbeard bring his son up as a pirate. Redbeard was interrogated by the governor, but he refused to give up his treasure. He escaped Cavendish's fate by breaking out of prison in the middle of the night. Redbeard recovered the treasure and acquired a new three-masted ship egotistically named after himself. This was quickly replaced by the two-masted Hurricane. He also adopted a green parrot, one of many such pets Redbeard would have over the years. Redbeard's new crew included Jolly Jack Crow, who idolized the captain, the loyal Cannonball Jimmy, and the salty ship's cook, Harry Hardtack. If Redbeard was to keep his new crew safe, he would have to avoid the Blue Coat fleet. Fortunately, a new opportunity for fortune and glory presented itself in the second half of Don Cortez's treasure map. Redbeard had no particular plans for the treasure, but threw himself into the adventure nonetheless. His brother had risen to become a pirate captain in his own right, running a sloop out of Skull Island. Unlike his better-dressed sibling, who still had a sense of fair play, Crag was a ruthless, slovenly braggart who cared for little other than his pet bat. He still had his half of the map after all these years, and so did Redbeard. Before long, both Crag and Redbeard were pitted against each other in a battle for Cortez's treasure. It was during this quest that Redbeard may have first violated his own principles. He took Crag's crony Drake Dagger prisoner, hoping to find information about the hidden treasure. Crag had hidden his own half of the map deep in a spider-ridden cave on Skull Island. Redbeard had sent his own men to retrieve the map, only to discover that Crag had sent Scurvy Dog, his most inept but loyal pirate, to infiltrate the Hurricane's crew. Both pirates searched far and wide for the treasure, but Crag was the first to find Cortez's gold, hidden deep in one of the caves on Skull Island. Like Cain and Abel, the brothers Crag and Redbeard were drawn inevitably into a decisive final combat. Who, if either of them, won the battle and claimed the treasure of Don Cortez has been lost to history. But at this point, Crag vanishes from Redbeard's story. It's probably no coincidence that Redbeard lost his left hand during this time and replaced it with a hook like his brothers. Whether this was a trophy or tribute is unknown. Not long after, Redbeard lost the Hurricane, possibly to his one-time admirer, Blackbeard. Redbeard had started his pirate career as an honorable sailor with a love of adventure and the unknown, but his battles against his enemies had cost him dearly. With this in mind, Redbeard began rebranding himself as a fearsome raider. Redbeard again changed his Jolly Roger, ditching the eye patch and adding a pair of crossed cutlasses. He even took up shark taming as a hobby, mastering the creatures that had taken his leg. It was said that even his sharks knew how dangerous he had become. In truth, this was mostly an act. When not wrestling sharks, Redbeard was known to take an afternoon tea break. Redbeard and his crew were betting that a frightening reputation would cause their enemies to surrender without a fight, hoping that no one would call their bluff. Perhaps this way, Redbeard could avoid the confrontations that had cost him his brother and 2 ships. Redbeard had undergone a transformation that would make him the most feared pirate in the 7 seas.